Welcome to Cheshire Corners. I'm Sebastian Coco, and I'll be your host as we trip through the looking glass. Today we're introducing the miniseries Psychospotlight, where we'll highlight important individuals in the psychedelic industry and put a spotlight on their specific work. To kick off the series, we're being joined by Dr. Rita Zelfand, an expert in modern psychedelic medicine who has taught about entheogens internationally and is the president of Right to Heal. Welcome, Dr. Zelfand.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, from kind of maybe childhood to where you went to school to how you got where you are today?
Okay, well, the can fit on a postage stamp version is I'm first generation Canadian American. I was born to Slavic immigrants in Canada and spent most of my childhood in the United States, and kind of bounced back and forth across the two countries, and never thought that I would go into medicine when I was a kid. People asking me what I was going to be when I grew up. Never did I say doctor. And then towards the end of my undergraduate degree, when I was, by the way, double major in religious studies and English literature with a minor in Russian language, a friend of mine pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Erica, when are you going to pull your head out of your back end and realize that you're supposed to be a doctor?" I was like, "What are you?" And that one sentence just turned my whole world upside down. Had to go back to undergrad because I didn't have any prerequisites for medical school. So I've done a lot of undergrad.
Of course.
And then went to medical school, got trained in functional integrative medicine, and opened up a practice as a primary care physician in Oregon. And what I thought I was going to be doing was very different than what was actually needed in my community. And very quickly I realized that my patients really needed help with mental health. And even though I was a primary care doctor and not a psychiatrist and not a psychologist, we have huge stigmatization of mental illness in our culture. So people don't want it on their record that they've seen a psychologist or psychiatrist, or they're embarrassed to say they're in counseling. For some reason, the American healthcare system thinks that like mental, emotional, cognitive health is not part of healthcare. So like mental and behavioral health is actually a different slice of healthcare. And so a lot of people's health insurance benefits weren't covering mental health. And I knew that if I was going to properly support my patients, that I needed to be able to meet them with more than just what was in my toolkit. And that's when I started doing a lot of extra training on integrative mental health, on functional psychiatry. And when you start pulling the thread of mental health, you don't have to pull too hard before you hit psychedelic medicine. And it very quickly became very clear that psychedelics weren't going to be the answer to every person's mental health problems, but it was a tool that absolutely had to be in the toolkit. That I could not have a comprehensive toolkit for mental health without psychedelics included in that. And so, without intending to, I somehow became like this really loudmouth advocate for the importance of psychedelics in psychiatry and in mental health. And now I actually helped found a nonprofit called Right to Heal. I also have created a bunch of online courses that both providers and regular people can take online. Because I think once people understand what psychedelics are and what they aren't, they tend to agree, actually, we need this. We need these tools. These are important. Let's keep these. And wait, why are they illegal? That's actually kind of like a pretty unsavory and racist history there.
It is.
As to why these substances aren't legal. So without meaning to, I've become political. And nowadays, I still have a very small medical practice. I still am practicing. And at our nonprofit, we consult with people around the world who are tired of hearing about psychedelics on podcasts, no offense to you, but then going to their doctors and saying, "Hey, is this right for me?" And then their doctors go, because they don't know. Hey, wouldn't you like to actually talk to a doctor who knows about this stuff?
Yeah.
So we offer that to people around the world. And I also train psychedelic facilitators now. I'm a lead educator at one of the programs in Oregon called Inner Track, and I also train folks online. I also lead training retreats. And so my story is just this classic, life is what happens when you make other plans. Because my plan was to be a primary care doctor treating ear infections and high blood pressure, and that is not what the universe has made me do.
Well, it sounds like even that wasn't the first plan, so plans on plans on plans at this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I thought I was going to be like an English teacher or, I don't know, an artist, but nope.
No, that's really awesome, and a lot of what you're talking about with the scientific merits of psychedelics is a lot of what we're trying to get at with this series. I mean, there are a lot of studies on psychedelics going back to the 1960s about how effective they are at treating mental illnesses in margins that are really unprecedented with other forms of treatment. So yeah, I completely agree with you. That's one of the big things that this is about. So we talked a little bit, danced around the fact that legalization is definitely on the horizon. So obviously you don't know specifically what Colorado is doing, but in a general sense, what would you suggest to Coloradan entrepreneurs who are planning on opening healing centers? And kind of on top of this question, Colorado regulators are planning on both offsite and in-home services. Do you think that both forms of psychedelic therapy will be as effective for patients?
I do because something that has become clear through the psychedelic research is that the setting is very important on the outcomes. And for some people, they feel safer in the setting of a clinical feel or of a service center model. Other folks feel trapped, suffocated, not safe, right? Other folks are going to feel safer in different environments. And the best environment to do psychedelic healing is the environment in which you are safe, both literally and in how you feel. And so I think allowing that to be curated by the client is important. Now, a concern that I have with these service centers is I really hope we don't go down the same route as we saw with the commercialization of ketamine, where a service center is going to include a building with 15 exam rooms that are sterile and air conditioned and have a fake plant in them and an eye mask. You know, I'm really hoping that some thought and some care will put into it because it will affect the outcomes. It will affect the success. Now, that being said, the studies we have from Johns Hopkins, you know, people have rated their psychedelic experiences as one of the top 5 most spiritually significant experiences of their lives. And that was in, you know, a hospital room in Baltimore. So, you know, taking that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes. We also have studies showing that if somebody is exposed to elements of nature during their trip, they're more likely to experience a mystical experience. And now we have all this data showing if you experience a mystical experience, you're more likely to have therapeutic outcomes. So my request or my hope of these service centers is don't treat this like a mill. This isn't a mill. And this isn't like any other therapy that we've had before. So let's make the setting nicer. Let's make the setting different. Let's make the setting more integrated than the standard issue healthcare setting.
Yeah, no, I totally and completely agree. I actually, in college, did a lot of work with lights and sound, some professionally, some not. And one of the things we actually might do here at the coffee joint as psychedelics become legalized is start looking at like what a recreational lounge space would look like. So I've actually thought a lot about what does setting mean in that kind of way, and how can you use lights, sounds, those kinds of oral stimuli to influence a trip in one direction or another. Very, very interesting. Like I think there'll be a whole field of study on how to make someone trip basically in exactly the way you want.
We're just getting started.
So yeah, we really, really are. So we'll hop to the next question. How does becoming a psychedelic facilitator work? Is it regulated by state boundaries? Or, for example, would Coloradans be able to take your online classes, which are certified through Oregon standards? If licensing were to begin in January 2025, when should potential facilitators in Colorado start preparing?
So I'm based in Oregon. So in Oregon, in order to become a licensed facilitator in Oregon, you need to have taken a facilitation training program that is approved by the state. And so I teach in one of those programs. And in Oregon, if you want to become a facilitator in Oregon, just for the first 2 years, the next 2 years, you have to be an Oregon resident. So we do have some students who are flying in from other states to do the training, but we've made it very clear to them, if you do this, the state of Oregon is still not going to grant you a license for 2 years, because Oregon residents are getting to have that head start on the programming.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in terms of my online trainings, they're not meant to be, I created them based on what I think people need to know. And I didn't make them based on what any specific state's requirements were, because I actually made my trainings before anything got legalized. And I've been teaching about this stuff for a lot longer than we've actually seen decrim or legalization happening. So anyone is welcome to do my online coursework. And in terms of if it translates into actual credit hours for whatever program they then enroll in, that's up to their own individual program directors. But when I created my courses, in particular, I have a 8-hour course bundle that I specifically created for healthcare providers. Anyone is welcome to take it, but I made it for healthcare providers for a very specific reason. And no, it isn't because I think that healthcare needs to bogart psychedelics. I don't think it does.
Sure.
But I also think it's ridiculous that when a patient goes to their doctor and says, "Doc, I've been on this antidepressant for 10 years and I'm reading all these articles about psychedelics. Can we talk about this?" I think that doctors should be able to lean in and have a conversation instead of going, "Well, I don't know, it's not FDA approved," right? And sounding
absolutely
stupid. It's your job to know about this. So get with the program. Here's a course. And you can't say, "Oh, there's no information." You don't have that excuse anymore. There is information.
They're really,
Studies
are everywhere.
Faster than I can write articles about them, right? So
really, yeah. And it's actually it's really interesting that you mention doctors specifically, because I think you're 100% on the money. It's the doctors and it's the PhDs on top of them that have been blocking psychedelics from any sort of real public space. I mean, even going back to like their naming scheme, they were called psychotomimetics up until really the 90s. Really a derogatory word. No, they're not. They don't mimic psychosis. Just it's been really consistently proven that they don't.
Correct.
So yeah, I think you're right on the money there, where we need a lot more official people analyzing these from a holistic, cultural, scientific, religious, artistic standpoint to evaluate, these aren't demonized, horrible. It's just, it's a big racist thing. I think you're totally right. It's a very politicized, oh my God.
You can't extract the racism from the history of the drug war in America. You can't.
It's impossible. They are intertwined.
Yeah. And also, recently in June, actually, the American Medical Association issued their position on psychedelics.
Really?
Which is, and they didn't say, "We can't endorse this." They actually got even more aggressive than that. They said, "We will oppose any claim that psychedelics can be used to treat any mental health condition unless it's been approved by the FDA."
That is crazy. Wow.
It is, in my opinion. And how wonderful that, first of all, the AMA doesn't speak for every physician.
Yeah.
Doesn't speak for me. But also how wonderful that these legalization efforts have an emphasis on the demedicalization of this work. So for example, in Oregon, you do not have to be a healthcare provider to administer psilocybin services. And to receive psilocybin services, you don't have to have a medical diagnosis. You can walk into a service center and say, "I am here because I am curious and I want to try a psychedelic." You don't have to have a depression diagnosis or anxiety, nothing. You can just walk in and be like, "I'm totally healthy and happy and I just want to try this." You're like, great, here's the form. So by circumventing the medical industrial complex, I think when the AMA issued this position statement, a bunch of people rolled their eyes and flipped them the middle finger, and they were like, okay, good for you. We're just gonna keep healing the world over here. You do you, boo, you know.
Well, and with GoodRx and, you know, Mark Cuban's new service, like the shifting away from the medical industrial complex has definitely been like a big focus of public efforts in the last 20 years. So honestly, it might not be the worst thing in the world. Hopefully psychedelics can make this kind of thing more accessible and cheaper, just less expensive, less debilitating to have any sort of mental disorder.
Right. But I mean, what we lose when we lose that relationship with the medical industrial complex is we slow down our efforts for having insurance cover this. Health insurance cover this. And now that's a whole other can of worms on, is that even a good thing if health insurance covers this? But what we get with insurance coverage is we get increased access. And right now, it's not even 1% of the population, right, that's taken psychedelics. This is niche, this is fringe, and guess who takes psychedelics? People with money. Or people with the right connections, or both. And a lot of the people who really need this healing don't know someone who grows mushrooms, and they don't have the money to fly to Jamaica to do a $10,000 retreat. And how do we get this medicine to them?
No, psychedelics are a medicine for the people, 100%. And I think that's one of the focuses of this series is looking at legalization efforts, looking at how everything's moving. Is there a way to shift that so the public is actually benefiting? Because a lot of professionals that are currently transitioning to psychedelics were in cannabis before that, and a lot of them have kind of quoted to me about just how damaging the corporatism that took over the cannabis industry was, and just how it turned off a lot of people and how it brought some of the wrong people on board. So I agree with you. I think psychedelics are a medicine for the people first and foremost, but it's going to be strange getting them to the people. It's going to be a process like we've never seen before.
Right, and as long as they're Schedule 1, it's really going to be a risk getting them to the people, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's a whole.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say a whole thing about the DEA, as I can't stand that.
Don't even get me started. In your opinion, do you think the legalization of cannabis was a good thing?
I think that I think it's less whether or not the legalization / the decriminalization of a drug is a good thing or not. To me, it's a lot more about how much we're able to actually study it, how much we're actually able to dig into it. The biggest reason that we don't know a ton about psychedelics right now, other than the fact that they go through really complicated neuroscientific processes, is the fact that we haven't been able to study them for 50 years. Like, since they were invented, or LSD was invented, mushrooms brought over, it's just been we've been barred from access, basically. So, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that the legalization of cannabis was 100% a good move that was for the betterment of every person in society. But I do think that the legalization of cannabis allowed for a lot more research, a lot more awareness, and just a lot more de-villainizing of something that was really a racial political tactic used back in the 30s by Hearst in the world, back when publishing mattered a lot more, in order to politically villainize the Mexican population. That was the first reason that cannabis started to be demonized in the first place. So to me, it's less about is legalization right or wrong. It's more about was illegalization wrong, because the illegalization of cannabis and psychedelics are both definitely wrong because they just fall under racial and political boundaries.
Right. Yeah. Well put.
Thank you.
Yeah. what he said.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Historically speaking, research into psychedelics has been a hot button issue due to the fact that researchers can only safely report legally procured findings. So now that politics and culture are starting to catch up with the existing science, which has been existing for our viewers since like the 1950s, do you see exploratory research expanding? And kind of a follow-up with that, now that your center is fully licensed, do you plan on doing any research of your own, or maybe allowing other scientists to use those facilities to conduct research?
I think research is definitely going to expand and explode now. First of all, for the first time in over 50 years, we had the US government funding psychedelic research. There was an NIH grant for a smoking cessation study and psilocybin. So that's a very promising sign right there. And in addition to one of the obstacles to research was it wasn't, legal. Another obstacle to research is funding. Because typically entities that fund research on drugs are either the government or pharmaceutical companies that want to take out a patent.
Sure.
And the US government is going to be very slow to fund research, although this is promising that they have just done so, because it would entail admitting hypocrisy.
Well, that's talking about the U.S. government and hypocrisy. You could do many lectures on that. So
yeah, this isn't the only case study on that. And pharmaceutical companies are likewise going to be slow or disinterested in funding psychedelic research because a lot of these compounds cannot be patented.
Yeah.
So they're not going to make their money back. So that means, who's going to fund the research? And up until recently, it was really Beckley Foundation and MAPS funding all the research.
Yeah.
Now we've got more universities. We've got Research Center at University of Wisconsin. We've got UCSF. We've got NYU. We've got Hopkins. We've got Imperial College. We have more sources now, and we have more funding, right? Like David Bronner has donated lots of money.
Yes.
McCluss, the Tom's Shoes guy, although that one was a little slimy, but we'll see how that plays out.
Sure, yeah,
but now there's money happening, and research needs money. And we've got more money now.
It needs a lot of money.
It needs a lot of money. And so I think, and this is very controversial in Oregon, where people are it's really quite a heated argument about the collection of data from the psilocybin service centers. I'm personally going to go on record and say I think it's a great idea to collect data from psilocybin service centers. We need that data.
Yeah.
That data is our research on these substances.
Well, I agree, particularly because psychedelics have a very vacuous scale of symptoms, we'll say. Like it's really, really hard to nail down exactly how someone is going to be tripped. So I think I understand the arguments of like it's a violation of privacy, HIPAA, XYZ. One, none of this is being done through like official boundaries, so HIPAA doesn't matter. But two, two, the bigger thing is like the two scales that we have to and I was just writing about them, the HRS and one other that was updated in 2006. But like the two consistent scales that we have to evaluate the effects of psychedelics both have over 100 like actual items each, and they are super multidimensional, and like we're talking about trying to observe and analyze something that is mainly defined by the human brain not being able to analyze what's happening to itself. So we need literally all of the information we can get to like start to hone in on what's actually happening beyond just serotonin being released and emotions being changed.
Yeah. We need different tools for measuring this work.
Yes.
And I think we are really starting to stretch the limitations of conventional research in that way. Now, actually, we have the Mystical Experience Questionnaire. So we even have a scale for doing that sort of thing, right?
Fun.
But yeah, we're having to research psychedelics, then we're having to research the way we do the research too, which gets real meta.
And it gets really weird. it gets really weird, especially with anything neuroscience, because neuroscience, it's not like chemistry, it's not like physics. We don't have centuries of data kind of backing up how things work. We've got about 50 years, 100 plus, if you're really going to count the like hand drawings of neurons kind of thing. But we're playing a little bit faster than we can write, if that makes sense. Like we're shooting the show as we're writing the script. It's all happening at the same time.
Yeah. As we were building some of the programs in Oregon, we kept joking, "Oh, we're building the plane as it's going down the runway." Like,
yes, no, absolutely.
It's been nothing, and pushing, and now it's all happening so fast that it's like, oh my gosh, how do we?
Yeah.
And I just wanna hate on the haters for a second, if I may.
Please do.
There are so many people on the sidelines crossing their arms being like, well, Oregon's messing it up. Me. Can you believe they're collecting data? Oh my God, no. And it's like, you know what, people? Rome wasn't built in a day. We're going to mess this up. That's part of the perfect recipe, right? You have to
make a mistake.
Right. You bake the thing and you're like, oh, it's a little dry. Okay, we'll add a little more oil. Oh, no, it's a little oil. Okay, now we tweak. And it's like, we got to start somewhere. And I think we're starting in a really good place. And yes, is stuff messed up? Of course it is, because how could anybody ace this, right? Like the first attempt out the gate.
Absolutely.
But we're making huge progress here for advancing this medicine, for helping people, really.
Well, and if you look at the kind of significance of effect of the studies in the last 5 years specifically, the helping people part cannot be contested. It is, I can't remember, because it was a while ago that I read, it was one of the first psilocybin studies that came out for depression in the last 5 years. But it was something like 50, 60, 70% effect, of the patients noticed a significant decrease in their mental illness symptoms. And we just have not seen anything like that ever. It's unprecedented.
The medicine works.
Yeah, it does.
It does. And what we might see is, I don't know, maybe we're going to see, it doesn't work quite as well if they only have one integration appointment. And if they have 3, they get 50% more improved. That's why we need the data, so that we can perfect this recipe. And that's why, that's why we learned so little in the dark years when all this work was underground, because we couldn't share what we were learning unless it was in whispers, in hallways, which isn't enough to really perfect a recipe.
No.
And we've got to perfect this recipe. We've got no time to waste, because we've got a huge mental health pandemic on our hands right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I 100% agree. Cool, so we'll go to the next question. A little bit shifting topics a bit. In our research, we came across the fact that your parents emigrated to the US from the Soviet Union. You confirmed earlier this is indeed true. So your perspective would actually be incredibly interesting when considering the current war in Ukraine. Do you think that psychedelics will come into play when addressing soldiers' trauma when the dust settles? And could this potentially be a watershed moment for psychedelics and PTSD? How do you see your own work playing a role in this healing process as well?
Wow. Well,
I know.
I think
super small and simple question, right?
Oh yeah, it's just a small thing of trauma and war-torn regions. Well, when we look at a lot of the research that MAPS has funded, in particular the research on MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of that research has come to us from Israel, which is another country that has known war for many decades. Yeah. And if you live in Israel, you have obligatory military service.
Yes.
And so a lot of the population of Israel has actually done military service and therefore has experienced trauma, and ergo, a big portion of that population has PTSD. Yeah. And so it's pretty clear that not just MDMA, but MDMA-assisted therapy is showing really compelling outcomes in that area. Now, in terms of what's happening in Ukraine, things aren't quite as stable there. What I would really love is, I would rather see prevention than cure. wouldn't it be great if every politician had to take at least 2 ayahuasca journeys before they ran for office?
I think that would be amazing. No, I completely agree.
No more wars, right?
Well, and that goes back to something, it was a while ago that I read this. I can't remember exactly when, and I don't remember where, so forgive me if this is not true. But I read something about the founding fathers of America, actually. Like, one of the punishments that they theoretically, just were basically talking to each other about of how to deal with tyrannical world leaders is put them on a dose of magic mushrooms and then reintroduce them to society after they've tripped and have kind of understood what they've done wrong and all that kind of stuff. So what you're talking about is something conceptually, it's been around for a long time. And there's some key ethical dilemmas, I think. But I do agree with you that if all politicians had to do 2 ayahuasca trips before they got into office, we would have a much better run government.
Yeah, so just on the note of maybe prevention rather than cure, right? That ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Some moms recently approached me because they had concerns about their sons, that their sons are becoming young men and they have this testosterone, which is, by the way, a really powerful drug and kind of a crazy-looking drug, right? And what does it mean to suddenly have all this power in the world? And what do you do with it? And how do you wield it for benevolent force, right? And for benevolent power and to do good and not harm. And so some moms approached me and they said, can we do some kind of initiation into manhood for our boys? And I was like, yeah, except we can't do it. It has to be led by the men. But so we're sort of curating it right now and recruiting men to help us. But the thought emerged of having initiation ceremonies that involve grandfather peyote or mushrooms or other age-old medicines like that. Because, and I know it sounds crazy, are you seriously talking about giving psychedelics to teenage boys? Yes, I am. Because it's easier, because our model right now is we are healing broken adults after they have already harmed other people. And we're now trying to rehabilitate them. And what if we could bake this into a culture where people actually receive that wisdom as they come of age so that they have a clearer compass on how they want to carry themselves in the world. And the kind of person they want to be and the kind of person they don't want to be, and having some kind of accountability to something higher than themselves. So, to answer your question about Putin, I think Putin should have done LSD when he was 13, but I wasn't there. So here we are. Now we have this racket. So
and now all this is going on.
Now this whole racket. So who knows what disaster could have been circumvented if we were not afraid of substances that have been in use since at least 5000 BC.
Yeah, and I would love to see big kind of cross medium studies of these specific cultures that you're talking about, some of the indigenous peoples of the northern Mexican mountains, some of the peoples in the Amazon and Peru, having full understandings and kind of it would be really, really, really incredible if we could show people with data and evidence that cultures founded in ceremonies of that kind of manhood, where psychedelics are at the core of how to perceive the self, they are, and I can't just say this obviously, but I would hope that they're happier, they have more meaning in their life, they know what they're doing a little bit better on this planet. I think that is one of the things that could really benefit that claim the most, I feel like.
Yeah, and the work doesn't just happen as 13-year-old kid, here's some mushrooms.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it has happened in a container, right? In some kind of either initiation ceremony, or at least within a community where that work is not only normalized, but even expected. So it's and this is something that we've had to dance as we've been collaborating with this Rhyia Maracame. Is his model is he leads the ceremony and then he leaves. which is great if we have a lot of local people in the ceremony. But when we have a lot of gringos in the ceremony, the Marakame leads and everyone's like, well, now what do I do with my
What do we do? Yeah.
You know? So traditionally, these medicines were used in a context in which you were doing this work alongside your neighbors, right? Your family members, your friends, other people that you live with. And then people who aren't in that ceremony, you return to your community and they receive you having understood what that work was. And so, just to be clear, I'm not saying 13-year-olds in suburbia who are isolated should go drop acid on their own. That's not what I'm saying.
Cheshire Corners does not promote teenagers dropping acid.
The medicine is just part of the medicine, to be very clear, right? Yeah. The container is very, very important. Hugely important. The container is arguably more important than the drug itself. And so, but to create that container, we need to make it safe. And that pathway to safety is research, education, dropping the stigma, changing the laws. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. But we've got a big army. So
yeah, thank God.
We will do it.
Just maybe. That's at least the hope that we have here. That one day we'll get past some of those societal and cultural and all the stigma and just get to a medicine that helps. Period.
Imitate success, as my mother says, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Dr. Zelfand, thank you so much for joining us. Seriously, it's been really amazing. We've had some really insightful conversation, I feel like. And to all our viewers, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of Cheshire Corners and more of this kind of psychedelic education. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks for having me. And at righttoheal.com is the nonprofit where you can learn more for free and take some of our courses too. Maybe we can help you out. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming.